Hey, everybody. Hey, social media friends. This is Angela Humphries, broadcasting for Woes in Wake, a new Facebook page I created to talk about Wake County issues. Today, I have a special guest, Joe Coletti. He is a senior fellow at the John Locke Foundation. He examines fiscal and tax policy, exciting stuff. He holds degrees from John Hopkins, SAIS, and the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Joe previously headed the North Carolina Government Efficiency and Reform Initiative. You'll have to tell us what that is, within the Office of State Budget and Management. So everybody, welcome Joe Coletti. Warm up and gear up some questions for him if you have something itching on your mind about budget issues. And Joe, you can answer Wake County or state level questions, but we're trying to focus on Wake County. So welcome. This is a new endeavor for me, making more work for myself, but trying to inform the community. So thank you for being part of the broadcast. And anything you would like to share about yourself before we get started?
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I was glad that you reached out to me the other day about the Wake County budget, since it's in the middle of the process, and it's an important thing for us to pay attention to, since in January we all got our notices about the revaluations and what happened to our house what our new house price looks like, or what the county thinks our house is worth now, and then how that gets translated into the taxes that we pay on that. And that was and you and I talked a little bit at a meeting of the Wake County Taxpayers Association where this was a topic. So I know we'll talk about that as we go through. I guess so I'm glad to be here, and to answer your first question about Johns Hopkins, or it was about NC Gear, the Government Efficiency and Reform effort.
Yeah.
And that was a program that when Governor Corey took office in 2013, with the Republican legislature, something that governors have done on a fairly regular basis in North Carolina and elsewhere, is to look through, especially when they're new in office and when there's a major transition like to Governor Corey after so many Democratic governors for the state. Take a look at what's going on in North Carolina, what's going on in the state. We had just come out of a recession. What is the spending that makes sense for the state to be doing, for state government, and what doesn't make sense, and how can we do things better with people's money, and especially since they were doing tax reform that year. So
Awesome.
Lower taxes, how can you improve spending in the use of that money? And so NC Gear was an effort to do that. And we took a look across all of state government. We brought in an outside consulting firm, ended up with about 21 recommendations, and 14 of them were actually implemented within a year.
Wonderful. So I was wondering, are people absorbing your recommendations, or anything coming out of the John Locke Foundation? Is it sticking? So that's great. That 14 out of 21 you said?
Yeah.
Great.
So some of those were done just within the administration. Some of those required legislation, but some of it was just about getting mission right, and some of it was about reducing costs, and accomplish some of those, and then there were others that are just more politically difficult and just logistically difficult. So, but
gotcha.
Was pretty happy with what we were able to accomplish, because a lot of times those type of reform efforts end up being doorstops, really big books that don't accomplish anything.
Well, what about tell everybody a little bit about the John Locke Foundation, because not everybody is going there for resources and literature, and so I just stumbled across it a few years ago. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that organization that you work for.
Yeah, no, love talking about the Locke Foundation. We're celebrating our 30th birthday this year. So it was founded in exactly. Huge thing. I started with the foundation in 2005. So when we were celebrating our 15th anniversary, and now we're celebrating our 30th, and had some time in state government and with the State Policy Network, which connects groups like the Locke Foundation across the country along the way. But for the most part, 15 years connected to the Locke Foundation. And we're a state-focused free market think tank. So think tanks kind of are the group that's between academics and politicians and the public. So there are great ideas being put forward by academics who are doing really deep dives on data and taking a look at things. Sometimes they're kind of esoteric questions, and politicians are looking for, and everybody else is looking for, well, how do we actually get something done? And think tanks, we exist to bridge that gap, to say here's some good research, apply some of what's being done theoretically, and take a look at some of the other states and what's being done, what they're doing on a practical basis, bring those things together. We apply a free market. We start from free markets and from general liberty principles. So when we say who can we trust more? Can we trust a parent more, or can we trust somebody in Raleigh to make decisions for everybody, for families and for even families within Raleigh, right? Can we trust somebody who's working in the bureaucracy versus somebody who's raising a child? We trust the parent. Who do we trust for seeing a healthcare provider? Do we trust the patient, or do we trust the regulators over of who in the Department of Health and Human Services to say we need, how many hospital beds do we need? How many ventilators do we need? So we exist to take a look at how do we expand liberty for people in North Carolina across policy. So we have research division, which is where I am. Terry Stoops takes a look at education, and he runs the entire research division. We have folks who look at healthcare, at regulations, at the legal system, at environmental policies. And then we have another group of folks who put out the Carolina Journal newspaper. It's a monthly newspaper, and then we have an online version with daily updates. And so carolinajournal.com is where you can see the news, generally not from the same perspective as the News and Observer. And then John Locke,
perspective I want to count.
And then johnlocke.org has the research, the papers that we put out. We just had something, our new thing is Carolina Rebound, which is recommendations across all of state government and down to some local level recommendations about how do we improve regulations, healthcare spending, and education to make sure that as we come out of the lockdowns, that we have a strong economy and a strong North Carolina going into the future.
Great. And you have a semi-newish president over the organization, right? I've seen Amy, I don't know what her I know she calls herself AOC.
Yes.
I've seen Amy's short clips, and these are pretty cool, very informative. And you don't have to sit down for an hour talk. Like, if that's not your thing, you could just, watch her shorts, or watch you're featured in some video shorts as well. Yeah. Other little organizations across the state are featured in some shorts. So that's really handy to have, even though there's a lot of groups that don't like the John Locke Foundation, but I am not one of those groups. Some people just do not like liberty.
That's right. We appreciate you and the folks who support us, and Amy Oliver Cook, the right AOC is how she's listed, and she's been great. She's provided a nice boost of energy for all of us, and we've needed that with the COVID crisis and everything else that's been going on. So
awesome. Well, yeah, that was a handful of stuff to take in. So hopefully when people leave the broadcast today, they will go explore some of the articles that are out there. They are very useful tools. They do help us become more informed. And that is our duty. If you didn't know that was your duty to the viewers, I'm learning as I go. So my government-run school didn't teach me. It was my civic duty to stay informed. I just expected politicians to do the right thing. And that is just not the case in politics. Sometimes people get a little bit of taste of power and they go crazy. And history does tend to repeat itself. If you pick up any history book, you can, easily see that. So learning from people like Joe here, Joe Coletti, and others in the John Locke Foundation and other liberty-minded groups can help keep us informed. But the budget, a Wake County budget, is 406 pages, which is what we're here to talk about today. So that's a little bit intimidating. So in an hour broadcast, you can't teach us what's on all 406 pages.
Right.
However, they do have like a Cliff Notes version on the Wake County website. And of course, that sounds all well and good because we're making cuts, it says, and then, we're not hiring and things like that. But I didn't know if there's anything that jumped out at you because you're kind of like the expert in this area. And you already have great recommendations in regards to the state of North Carolina. And then you also had an article published about what local governments can do under coronavirus COVID-19 situations already. Like I don't know if you published that in April. So you're already on the ball. We are not. We're just catching up and figuring out, are we getting taxed more? Are there going to be bonds? These are things we should be paying attention to because it's taking money out of our families. So, so what jumps out at you about the Wake County budget?
Well, the first thing with governments across the state and across the country, revenues are down, and so the first recommendation that I had in the piece that you posted, that you provided a link to, that I wrote for SPN, and that we also had a version of at the Locke Foundation and have done some work, done some writing in other places. But first recommendation is don't raise taxes. That's because, as you said, this is that's coming out of families' pockets, and these are especially if you've been unemployed or your company has had to shut down, or there are so many people who have been affected by this, by the economic impact, regardless of whether they were sick or anything else. There so many folks have lost income or are facing uncertainty on that side. That the last thing that you want is for the state government or for the county or city to come back and say, and we ran out of money, so you need to pay us more, even though you're out of money too.
Sure. So
that's the first recommendation, and the lost revenue is on the sales tax side, which kind of makes sense. That sale because restaurants and retail were all closed down, and it was hard to get out to do things. There was less travel, so we lose occupancy tax. We lose, right? There's a lot of places where that sales tax kind of comes from, but the property tax is the largest portion of the state budget. So that's probably something to talk about for a minute before going into some of the recommendations and things. Is that the county gets 80%, 77% of its budget this year. In the last few years is about 75, 77% comes from property tax. So which is why the appraisals was such a big deal earlier this year. And that the good thing about the property tax from a government perspective is that it's a consistent number from year to year. It is not driven by the economy. It doesn't fluctuate as much. The value of a house is not going to change a lot from year to year, whereas the sales tax, which makes up another 10% or so of the budget, it was $200 million last year. The budget expectation for this year was about $200 million, and the county is only expecting $160 million for the next fiscal year, the year that starts on July 1st. So that's a 20% reduction in the revenues that are coming in from that. The property tax, I always want to make sure that I'm saying the right numbers, was about $1.1 billion. And that's relatively consistent from year to year. The county had been raising taxes, had raised the property tax 6 times in a row since 2014. And it was about $680 million when that started, and we're up to $1.1 billion this year. So you can see some of that is expanded tax base, people building new commercial facilities, people building new houses, new folks moving in, and as sales of old houses happen, there's some change there, but a lot of that increase is just higher, is the higher property tax rate. But that's $1.1 billion, and that's going to stay relatively consistent versus the sales tax, which is going to fluctuate in some years 20% or more from year to year. So the property tax is a useful thing, but because the sales tax has fallen and other areas of taxation have fallen for the county, that leaves them with less money to work with, and so they're starting from what was the spending in the year that we're currently in. So they have to go back and find a way to reduce spending this year, even as there's more demand for some healthcare related items, and as folks are in greater need of income assistance and housing assistance. So they're facing a dilemma of, well, our revenues are down, but there's greater demand for our services. And going into next year, kind of the same thing. And so that's what they're planning on. The biggest thing for me is that the revenue shortfall. Dealing with that, one of the surprising things to me, given how much school spending has grown over the past few years, which that's been what's been driving the property tax increases. How do we pay for the schools? The county is keeping the operating budget for schools consistent. $516 million for the current year, $516 million next year. It's a huge increase from 6 years ago, but there's at least a recognition that you cannot increase spending as the student population has not grown much in a year when you have lower revenues. So
yeah, and there's other red flags leading up to. So if we're going to talk about K through 12 government-run school funding and whatnot, there's backstory that we can't cover in an hour. But I mean, I could say I slept poorly last night because I was watching old board meetings where the citizens were, barely audible, because there would be 4 or 5 people that would say, please don't raise my taxes, while the majority of the room were loud and proud from the teachers union, donned in the red shirts saying, tax me, we need more money. The schools are dirty. This child is not getting care and with an ever increasing educational budget, there's always something to complain about, like, oh, well, we have to give some to public charter schools. Well, you just got done saying, literally, they would get done saying, oh, every child deserves a sound basic education. Except when it comes to other schools other than the government-run schools. So, I already advocate for school choice, but I don't do it for political reasons. I do it because I see these groups everywhere burdening my family, like taking more out of our household because they want these eternal tax increases. And when's it going to stop? It's not going to stop with special interest groups, apparently. But I know that's a rabbit hole you probably don't want to go down. But yeah, the spending continues with K through 12 education, right?
Yeah. Well, so the positive thing is that the spending is not growing. Is not going to grow in the next year.
Yeah.
So over the past 6 years, it's grown 51% per student, and so that's that. So we can look to there's an opportunity here for the county to reduce spending. And this is operating spending. This is what the county provides on top of what the state already provides, because the state is the primary funder for operating expenses for schools across the state. And so Wake County's $3,000 per student is on top of the $8,000 already that the state provides per student. And so there is room to reduce that. And that's not including the capital. So but for the situation that they're in, they've overspent. Fortunately, that we're not like Chicago, Nashville, places where there was no ability, where the governments were so out of control that they had no room at all, no fiscal space at all, no room, no money left over to survive lost revenue, and we see them. Nashville is raising their property tax by the equivalent in North Carolina of I think 30 cents. So it's a huge tax increase that Nashville is facing. There are other cities and counties that are facing huge tax increases. Here in Wake County, fortunately, it's at least they're taking the cardinal rule, which is don't raise taxes, and they're living on that one. And this is truly a no tax increase. I can't believe how nicely I'm speaking about the Board of Commissioners, because for the last 6 years they have been raising taxes all the time, and part of it is
I know I gotta let you go, Joe. Come on now.
But part of it is that with the tax increase that they passed last year was intentionally high.
Right.
So that they didn't have their goal was not to have to come back and raise taxes again and again and again, because they had done it for 6 years in a row.
Yeah, let's not raise taxes during an election year.
Right.
Let's get on last year.
Yeah. So they did that, and the appraisals so the reappraisals, some of us are going to face higher taxes. Like I have a higher property tax bill because the home that I own grew in value faster than the average. So the county does what's called a revenue neutral revaluation. And they take a look at all the properties that already exist, that somebody already owns. And they say 4 years ago, it was $100,000, say. And today, the average price has gone up to $120,000, which I've understated the average price for homes in Wake County, but I can only do math on so many levels. Right? Mm-hmm. So if the average is up 20%, then they turn around and cut the tax rate by roughly 20%, so that the end result is that last year you paid 72 cents on your $100,000 house. This year on your $120,000 house, you're going to pay 62 cents per $100. Okay. So they reduce the tax rate to keep the revenue collected from folks the same. Then we have new construction, and that increases the amount of property tax that's collected. And so you'll see that the property tax actually, that $1.1 billion is actually about $100 million more than last year, or $50 million more than last year. And that's because we've had so much construction happening that is not subject to being reappraised. It's just selling at a new rate, right?
Okay.
But they kept the revenue neutral rate, which is a good thing, and which gets lost in some places. I have worked with the folks in Iowa, and in Iowa, every time there's a reappraisal, they don't adjust the tax rate. And so if you had a $100,000 house last year and your house is now up to $120,000 this year, you're just paying 20% more in taxes because they're not going to adjust the tax rate. That's one thing that North Carolina as a state has done well, is it's forced every county to say what the revenue neutral tax rate is. And then you have to adjust that if you want higher taxes. And so I can't say for sure that if it wasn't for the budget crisis, that the county commissioners would have felt perfectly comfortable going out and raising taxes again. But right now, we get to pay the same rate, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, they're claiming that. Let's see, I think I lost what I was about to say there because I was looking at your article. Mm-hmm. I was going to say they are claiming they are making 17 million in cuts, I think. but that is, I think it breaks down to 1%. There's a couple of red flags I think I told you about maybe on the phone that they said, oh, they're doing a hiring freeze. However, when you actually listen to the Wake County Board of Commissioners meetings, which are frequent and super boring and super long, and one person can't watch them all. So I see there's a few people watching. By the way, the greatest compliment you could do right now is share this so more people can learn about the Wake County budget and the entire process. It is boring, but we're going to try to make it a little bit more fun, right? We're not elected officials. I don't have to be politically correct. Joe might have to be, but anyway, we want the message to share to other people so they can be informed. But anyway, getting back to, they're claiming that the revenue neutral, of course, is good. My husband's had to explain that to me, but like I've told you, I'm not the budget expert. Like, this is not something that I want to talk about every day. I'd rather you talk about it because this is what you do with a smile on your face. But there are some takeaways for just average Joe like me, right? You're not an average Joe. This is what you focus in and specialize in. But I wanted to bring up that article. I think it's the same one that's linked right there in the comments. So you mentioned, I think you already went over the first one, revenues will fall, right? So and the next bold section, you stated most expenditures will not fall. Right. So what stood out to me also with Wake County's budget was that they're pushing through projects. I think you made a comment in a former video where you were like, if you didn't need this service 200 years ago or 40 years ago, whatever, then that's a place where you can cut back. If you just added this program right before COVID, these are my words now, why do you need to ram it through when you have a shortfall? You're saying you're making less. I mean, I don't know if they're really making less money because of the CARES Act. So I don't know if you could dig into that a little bit. Because isn't that a lot of extra income, or not income, but revenue, or what do you call that?
Technically, I think we would use the term availability,
Okay.
which basically means money, because revenue is what you collect as a government, and then you have intergovernmental transfers, and so that's when the state sends money down to the county to pay for schools, or when the county gets money to pay for Medicaid, because Medicaid and child care and child protective services, foster care, all of those things are either state dollars or federal dollars that go to the families through the county. So those show up as other transfers. They show up in the revenue, or they show up in expenses the same way. Just the source of funding ends up being something different. And so, so Wake County has wakegov.com/budget, where you can find this year's budget. And the revenue is on page 81 of the budget document, and the general fund revenue and the general fund expenditures are pages 82 through 85. So they break it down by agency and how the money is going to be used in some way. And the point that I was making with most expenditures will not fall is that so much of what a county spends on is mandated by another level of government, or is just inherent in being a government. So in North Carolina, the schools are a required contribution for the county.
Sure.
The level of operational spending is not, but once Wake County adds a teacher based on the state formula, and as Wake County says, we're going to provide an additional X percent per teacher. Once that teacher gets added, because the state tells them to add it, then they have to throw in that additional money for that teacher. Okay. Medicaid spending, the administrative cost of Medicaid is entirely state and federal paid, but child welfare services, other administrative services that the county provides, housing, things like that, though all of those costs are just things that they have to bear. The sheriff, they have to pay for that. The courts and the jail system have to be paid for by the county. And so when you start breaking down what does the county have to do and what is it choosing to do, most of what they do is actually a have to. And so then you have to go, once you recognize that, then it becomes a question. Then it's just marginal things that you're worried about. Which marginal things when you're dealing with a $1.5 billion budget are a lot of money. But the changes that you can make, there are some things that you can eliminate an entire department, and it's still not going to affect the budget. Whereas you can make a small change in education or in some of the other areas, and that can make a significant difference in the bottom line for the county. And so that's what we have to start taking a look at. One of the interesting things, and it's kind of across the board for the county, but I'll just use community services. I'll use general government. That the budget is about the same going into is actually lower next year than was budgeted this year. So this year, all general government expenditures was the budget had it at $63 million. The actual expenditures is probably going to be less because there's less money coming in. The budget for the recommended budget that the county is going to be voting on, that the Board of Commissioners will be voting on, is $59 million. So that's a nice 5% savings. The problem for us taxpayers is that in 2019, so the year that ended last June, spending was only $50 million. So it's a decrease from what the budget is this year, but it's a significant increase from what was spent just a year ago. And so then you have to break that down and say, well, $3 million of that increase is in information services. That is potentially some increase for better information systems to manage the county budget. Another $100 million is in budget and management services. $400,000 in facility design and construction. There's $2 million increase, $2.5 million increase in the Board of Elections. And I don't know how much of that is one-time money because this is a presidential election year, right? But so then you have to start looking at each of those individual pieces and what's driving those. And again, the disconcerting thing with all of that is while these are savings from the current year, and that's a great thing that they cut back, and yes, it's 1% and it's only $17 million out of a $1.5 billion budget. But the total spending, because they spent so much more this year compared to last year, there was a $150 million increase from 2019 to the current fiscal year. You still end up with $100,000 more in county spending for the next year than you did for last year, right? So there was that much of an increase, and that goes back to the tax increases that have been happening over the past 6 years. Like if we take a look back to 2014 and compare that to 2021, it's a huge increase. All of those increases kind of came along the way, and so it's good to have the fiscal responsibility. Now I feel more comfortable. I'm not speaking highly. The reductions in the recommended budget are coming from a really high level to a not quite as high level.
Sure.
If we compare that to any previous year, you can see just how much county spending has grown.
Well, I don't think I finished my sentence, but earlier, just because I got off tangent, but when I was watching the meetings, I was saying they suspended the hiring, but they were like, oh, if you provide us with a waiver, we
Mhm.
might not need to suspend new hires.
Right.
We're going to tell everybody we suspended new hires for the time being. But before I forget, I wanted to share the video question, and you may have answered it. I'm not sure, but I want to encourage everybody who's watching or who's watching later after the live broadcast that we can participate, even though we're in our homes, or Joe, you're at your office, I'm at my home.
Yeah.
Most people are at their homes.
That's right.
And just try to make these virtual meetings a little bit more fun. I asked viewers, which I didn't really have any viewers yesterday because this is kind of a new adventure, just to talk about these Wake County issues affecting us all. I asked people to submit questions by way of Facebook Messenger and just submit a video, and I would play it for Joe. So I have a video here, and I'm going to go ahead and play it. Let me put it on full screen and see if I could get it in front of the camera. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Here it goes.
Salem Usio. I'm the Republican nominee for North Carolina Senate District 15, representing Wake County. And so my question for you today is about budget shortfalls. We're expected to have budget shortfalls all across the state, particularly here in Wake County. And I'd like to know your thoughts on addressing budget shortfalls without the need for raising taxes or issuing bonds. I think raising taxes right now would just hurt people and kick them while they're down. So I'd like to know what your specific recommendations would be for cutting spending here in Wake County. Thanks a lot. Bye.
So we're dancing all around that right now. So that's Mario Usio. Thank you, Mario. He's running for, I think, Senate District 15 in Wake County. So, you know, candidates, politicians, they are relevant to this conversation too, like you were saying. So, but we didn't address bonds, but you did talk about tightening up, not spending as much. So you kind of answered parts of that question. What do you think about? Do you think voters need to know anything when they see bonds on the ballot, or when they see? So, for example, I noticed there's a bill introduced recently that there's going to be an education and DOT bond, I think. Yeah. And with all the CARES spending, you know, coming down from the federal level, I know that the federal government is $23 trillion in debt, I believe now. It could be higher. I don't know what happened by the time I went to sleep last night and now. But and it's going to be higher, right? I think they're still printing money. And I'm not for printing money or spending money that we don't have. So bonds, I feel we're ill-informed about. So what can you share about bonds, and what do you think we as citizens are missing about bonds when we go to the ballot? Should we just check yes when we see education?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I'll start at the federal level and work down to the county level. So starting with the CARES Act and the borrowing that's happening there, that does not that does not require a vote of the people. Right. That's
right.
part of what we have at the federal level is just they get to borrow money, and the Federal Reserve can print the money to offset it. And we've seen a lot of that. And so, and yes, there is going to be more. We just don't know how much yet. We know what the House asked for, and I anticipate that the Senate will provide less, and then they'll have to figure it out. But so that's at the federal level. That's just I work with state and local governments because they're understandable and they actually deal in reality.
Okay.
And at the state and local level here in North Carolina, most debt has to be voted on by the people, and so the potential that you mentioned, the $3.1 billion for education and transportation, that there's a bill in the legislature for that. I don't think it's going to pass. It should not, and I don't think it will, because that's taking on a lot of debt, and there are other ways to fund those needs besides borrowing. I'm pretty sure it's a bargaining chip and it's a way to accomplish things, right? But and at the county level, we've passed a number of bonds already. We being collectively, whether you voted for them or not, right? You have to pay for it.
Yes.
And so
For 32 children in 2018. What was that? It was a $548 million bond for 42 new kids, I think.
Yeah, that was.
And people can Google Wake County bonds and see a bunch of old articles come up.
Yeah, and it was the first. So it was the first of 3 planned bond issues for the county because student growth has been as slow as it has been. We'll see. I didn't see the point for the first one, and we'll see what happens with the next 2. And there is no bond issue on the ballot for Wake County. For Raleigh, there is an affordable housing one that's still being advocated and will potentially be on the ballot in November. And the thing with bond issues at the state level or at the county level is that's deferred taxes. Just like at the federal level, we know that $23 trillion is going to have to be paid some way, whether that's through inflation, meaning the tax on everybody who saves money, or whether that's through actual taxes on income or on payroll taxes. That money has to come from somewhere. And at the county level, the main source is usually from the property tax. And so there's a limit on what can be borrowed, but all of us, when we're seeing something on the ballot, we should recognize that we're just saying that we want our taxes to be higher in the future.
That's sorry to interrupt you while you're mid-thought. Greg is running for a Wake County Commission. I guess he's using his wife's account. Hey, Greg. Or Judy, whoever. The county will be receiving $164 million from the feds as part of the federal CARES Act. Oh, CARES Act, yes, because they care so much, right? Most of the hiring freeze relates to the sheriff department vacancies that have not been filled since the last election. Greg, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So, because you had brought up earlier about the hiring freeze and the waivers, and generally that's the first thing that governments will look to is where are there open positions, and either you eliminate the open position or you just say we're not going to fill the open position, and it's still on the rolls that when money is available it can be filled. Or the government simply says we're eliminating this position. Apparently, it took you 6 months, especially if it's been around for 6 months. You say you haven't filled it yet. We're going to take it back, and so that frees budget space that won't be used for something else, right?
Okay.
And so. Usually, if there's a vacancy in the sheriff's department in Wake County, would be one of the biggest places one of the biggest sources of payroll for the county that it actually has control over, because the county doesn't hire the school teachers, the school system does. Where can you go for an immediate savings and have an impact? And the biggest place for that is going to be on that side.
Oh, they're never going to have that, though.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's one takeaway from watching those former budget hearings where the public is invited, by the way, and that was kind of like one of the stepping stones that helped me get involved in politics and ruin my life. No, just kidding. But I just kept seeing the common theme in all the meetings I was going to was the teachers union, and demanding more positions, expanding government. So that means we want to hire psychologists, nurses, counselors, more teachers' assistants. It's always we want more positions, which creates more government, which creates more spending, which sucks more out of my household.
Yeah.
And we are middle classers. So we're the group that, we can't escape the government school unless we pay for it ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's another conversation, but there's still a lot to learn about the budget. And I think the 406 pages is very intimidating. I wish it was trimmed down. But I mean, it is workable, right? The problem areas about it are some of the areas are not exploded, like line items.
Right.
So if it says, what's your department with John Locke Foundation? Research.
Research, yeah.
Yeah, so if there's just a line item for research, we don't exactly know what that expense was, right?
Right.
And then we have to request that they explode that and break it down for us and say, okay, we have 5 staffers here. Here's their salaries. They're going to all say we can't share private information and things like that. But just trying to piece puzzle pieces together is hard, and getting your questions answered by way of government is hard, because they don't talk about everything, whether it's a 2-hour meeting or a 4-hour meeting. But anyway, going back to expenditures and saving and going through a crisis and trying to make cuts and things like that, or what'd you say, tax neutral? What did you call it? Revenue neutral?
Revenue neutral. Right.
I'm learning.
You're getting it, yeah.
You also mentioned in economic incentives. You could show some restraint there, and Wake County has not shown restraint when it comes to incentives. So you want to talk about those for a second?
Sure. Yeah, and incentives is when a company is looking to move from one place to another, then the county will often reduce property taxes to help them to encourage them to come here. And so the unfortunate thing with that is that those taxes then get diverted to every other business that already exists here, sometimes even including competitors of the transferring business. And they've proven to be ineffective at actually accomplishing economic development. They've also proven to be really effective at providing a safety net for politicians, right? Because they get to say, "We tried." Right? If they put forward an economic incentive package, they can say, and the business doesn't come here, they can say, "We tried. We did our best to bring company X to Wake County." And everybody says, "Great job. You thank you for trying to improve our economy." And then if they do come here, they say, "Look, we brought this company here," and the payments are usually less. But the main point is that it's money that doesn't need to be used to accomplish the goal that is the stated intent. And it's an expensive portion of the budget.
And you said X. You said company X was ironically didn't Xerox.
But they were one of the companies a few years ago that got some money. Yeah,
but that might have been due to the executive branch of government. I think it was on the state level. Didn't Cooper have something to do with that? Like Cooper did an incentive, I think, and then Wake County did it. I don't know if they had a hand in Amazon or something else. I forget. Last year,
the government's always usually state-led. There's less ability to recruit internally to recruit a company from, say, Mecklenburg to come to Wake County, but for companies that are looking at North Carolina and looking at Wake County from out of state, that's going to be a combined effort from the state and the county, and the chamber will be involved. One thing that I want to make sure that in the budget itself, you had mentioned it's 406 pages and there's a lot of information there. Once you start breaking it down, it's like if you can take it into bite-sized pieces, it's easier to do. If you start at that page 81 through 85 and take a look at the overview, then most of what comes after that, the next 300 pages, is all detail on what's being spent and why. So you can take a look at the Board of Commissioners and why are we spending the money there. You can take a look at law enforcement and the $48 million that's being spent there. What's the change that's happening on that side? To get a look at the line items, the county still has available at a website called watch.wakegov.com. It's the Wake Accountability Tax Check. It was something that they started a number of years ago, and that shows you kind of it's the county checkbook. It's not as to understand policy, it's not as helpful, but to see where the money's going, you can see where the checks are being written almost to the place, and so you can see when county commissioners are traveling for trainings. Where are they staying at a hotel? How much are they writing back, seeking reimbursement for their travel expenses? So you can see that level of detail there. The budget is fairly high level, but otherwise it becomes really burdensome. And 406 pages is bad enough. Mm-hmm. And then after the fact, so those are two tools that you have: is the budget itself for the plan about how things are going to be spent. You have the watch.wakegov.com to see how money is being spent today, and you can go back to previous years and take a look at the checkbook level. And then there's the annual financial report. So every county in the state and most cities produce a comprehensive annual financial report.
Because the terms don't want to touch any of those documents.
Those are like they're things that are really intimidating. Mm-hmm. But it's like the annual report of a company that you get to see what the revenues are, what the expenses are, what the liabilities are, and how much the county has on reserve in its savings account available to be spent. And the county has built up a very large reserve for working capital to be able to get by. So some might argue that it's too large. I think there's always a need for some of that money. And you can go through that CAFR and you can take a look not just at what's been spent, but you can take a look at the bonded debt, that it's $2.5 billion of bonded debt that the county has, which works out to $22,187 per person. You can take a look at the pension obligation. Since people are the biggest expense for the county takes care of retirees through a statewide plan called the Local Government Employee Retirement System. Statewide plan, everything is set by formula. The county has almost no flexibility with that. And so they have to pay about 8% of payroll each year to make sure that they're covering the actuarially determined value for future retirees, and there's an unfunded liability there. There's an unfunded liability for retiree health benefits, but you can see all that in the CAFR. So you kind of, if you can steel yourself or break it into small pieces, you have some really good documents that can help you understand how the county's spending money. Is it doing a good job with it? It's never as transparent as you would like, because you have to decipher what all of this means, but the tools are there, and we can talk more on individual things, or you can reach out to the folks in county government, or you might have a viewer who's on the county commission next year, and he can help you understand it, and you can help them with like what should they be doing. And so that's those three tools: the budget, that watch checkbook portal, and the CAFR are three good things to be able to understand how county government operates. And the money is the thing that tells you everything else.
Okay, yeah, I saw the watch tool when I was on the website late last night. And it was all the way to the right on the top, and I was seeking the budget and seeking being, I like the Cliff Notes version too, because it goes over the highlights. Here's some bad, here's some good. And then the 406 pages has a ton of information too. And I think I did print it last year, and I did, I printed it, and then I showed up to the Wake County government public hearing with it and highlighted bits and pieces and made my own notes and things like that. Because we as a citizenry are able to redress our grievances to the government. Wake County is a branch of local government. And unfortunately, you only have 3 minutes to make your case, and they don't answer questions. But now, under COVID restrictions, they're inviting the public to submit comments digitally, which I would love the public to do. But if the public is not going to take the time to look at the budget, then they're not going to have questions. But over the past few weeks, it seems like comments and questions have been steamrolling. But then there's also been initiatives to people to send in comments to say, spend money on, I don't know if it was called Wake Prevent, which was like expanding a homeless program and adding more brick and mortar structures. But I think that was funded through the CARES Act, I believe. So they doubled capacity, because think, if you're homeless and you're trying to not get people sick and provide services, you need them spaced out 6 feet. And then they had another program where they had to modify it. I mean, just all these COVID modifications are insane. It's got to be insanely costly. And it's so unfortunate. Like, we can't even predict how much we're potentially throwing in the garbage to make these little accommodations here and there. And while health and safety is very important, I will say I've gone to several rallies and have not come down with anything, knock on wood. And, I've hugged people recently, and I'm still here. And I haven't met anybody that has COVID. So there are questions when it comes to that. But anyway, I think it takes time to explore the Wake County government website, but I really wanted you on to help us navigate. And so I think you have done that. You gave us a great starting point, told us exactly where to go on the Wake Gov website. I always like to tell people, I've been telling people for like over a year, because I can't watch all these meetings myself, right? They are boring. One person is not really going to make a difference, even though we might hear about it from time to time in history books, right? Like John Locke, he's an awesome person. And I have a couple of his books that I need to dig into further, but you really need multiple people moving at the same time. So comments that are coming in to spend more money or expand government, those have to, so if the money's coming on the federal level, how is it going to be sustained after COVID-19? If you're doubling a homeless structure, how is that going to be maintained later? And so when you listen to them talking about these issues in the live meetings, they're like, how are we going to sustain that later? We want to keep that going. They're saying they want to keep it going. And I'm like, oh no, like, why do you want to keep it going? You weren't full before. You're just spreading people out. But another important thing about the website was the public comment thing. So I kind of went off on a rabbit trail, but that's okay. We're just having a conversation here. And, I'm not a subject expert in everything, especially not this issue. And I'm learning as I go too. But I would love for others to come and learn with me. So if people can go to the Wake County website and find where there's an announcement that says the Wake County recommended fiscal year 2021 budget public hearing, and then it goes into directions about leaving comments. So notice of public hearing by Wake County Board of Commissioners to receive comments concerning the recommended fiscal year 2021 budget. And so it's actually like a formal notice. I don't know if they've done that in previous years. So I'm wondering if they're doing this because they're not allowing the public to come in and do that 3-minute speech like I was telling you about. So it seems kind of formal to me. But anyway, and then there's an intake form. They have basically a Cliff Notes version, again, about, the hearing process will be open until a certain date. So the budget public hearing will remain open for comments submission until Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020 at 5 p.m. And it talks about $2 billion for all county operations. So it has a little summary, and then toward the end of that is where you make your public comments. So if people could make it past the 3 screens and submit their comments, keep in mind, the public should always keep in mind that they're adding their voices to part of a permanent record. So you definitely don't want to be swearing at anybody because it's going on the record. Other people will see it. Some of them will be attached to the meeting minutes. They take pretty decent meeting minutes.
Yes.
So any citizens can go back and review that if their internet didn't work for the video portions or whatever. But the public hearings that we're talking about coming up, those do not have meeting minutes. So if I wanted to go back and see what I said 2 years ago, I got to figure out where part of the meeting I spoke in. And I see some of my friends that are currently my friends today that I didn't know 3 years ago. And then I see a lot of those same faces that, want to spend more and will never have enough and throw more money at the schools and all that good stuff. I'm sure you hear a lot about that. But yeah, I'm sorry, that was a big rant, right?
No. That's the public comment is an important thing. It's also, like you said, 3 minutes where your voice can be drowned out as well. So it's you do have to have a lot of people. It's better to have multiple voices with you, and also look for the informal ways to be able to connect with the county commissioners and those who are in charge to be able to make some change.
Yeah, I'll have to figure out the informal ways. I'll continue emailing them and see what information I can get. So I was gonna put up their email address, but I don't want people to be confused and email the county commissioners. They do have a general intake. It's like commissioners at Wake.gov or something like that. But I'd rather people go on the record and submit a comment and say something after they dig into the budget. So so you want to just repeat what page 81, start there.
That's going to be the summary table. So for the numbers geeks like me, page 81 is page 81 to 85 tells you all the numbers.
Cool.
And so that you take a look at those numbers, and either you find something that piques your interest, like the information services or the Board of Commissioners, or whatever it is that you either know something about, or that you look at a number and say that's a big jump. Go back to the table of contents, find that page, and dig in. Okay. For a lot of folks, it's going to be, let's go through the summary, the Cliff Notes version that you referred to, and let's read the narrative and see what they're talking about, where they want to spend money, and that's the place to go. So, yep, that's
the summary was right on. Like, you could literally Google Wake County budget. I think fiscal year 21 comes up because what they pass it. Do you remember when they pass it? You looked it up yesterday. Was it the 14th or 15th of?
The 15th is the county commission meeting where they'll be voting. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the 15th of June, they vote in the next budget, and their fiscal year begins, right? So
July 1st is when the year begins. Yeah. So there's about a 2 weeks in between, just in case there's some controversy.
Yeah. So we're not doing this at the very last minute. I was thinking it was maybe coming up next week. So I'm glad the viewers have a little bit of time to prepare, dig in a little bit, maybe see something that hits home or strikes a chord to them, and then just encourage more people to get involved. And I think this was a great conversation. And thank you for giving us the foundation to get started, because I really, it is intimidating. So I think you called that right.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at the state budget for years, and the first time I looked at it, when I started looking at county and city budgets, I had to reach out to the folks at the School of Government at Chapel Hill and say, all right, y'all got to help me, This is, I mean, I understand one level of budget. This is a completely different thing.
Oh no. Okay, so we'll stick.
Yeah, but so yeah, it's intimidating for all of us, but it is, but it is manageable. You just have to take it in small, in some bite-sized pieces. Don't walk away from it. It's kind of like the first time you go to a gym, first time you go to a CrossFit, whatever it is. You just have to get. You have to get past that first level of intimidation, do something, and the rest of it starts coming easier. And for folks who are interested, our website is johnlocke.org. You can find some of what I've written there. We're also on Facebook, the John Locke Foundation. Carolina Journal has the news. I'm on Twitter at Joe Coletti. So, tag me in a tweet, or if we're following each other, direct message me. I'm on Facebook. Just reach out any kind of way, and glad to help. And thanks, Angela, for everything that you're doing and to help folks know about the Locke Foundation and to get them involved in the process from the city on up through the state and the federal level. So appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom and keeping us focused, right, on where to begin and then to follow through, because we don't need to learn everything from the media. We can figure it out ourselves if we just kind of just take a small chunk, right? Just like when we're learning vocabulary words when we're 4.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Into pieces. I mean, I think you literally said break it into small pieces, and I'm like, no. So okay, thank you so much, Joe. And I might hit you up on Twitter and be like, what's this thing that they're doing?
Yeah. No.
Thank you so much. And I hope people will explore the John Locke Foundation and all the great articles that are there. Lots of insight. And I hope people will send you some questions, right? Because that probably spices up your day a little bit, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
It reminds me to take a look at things like when you reached out for this interview. Oh yeah, this is a good time to do that. So
thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Angela.
All right. Well, that's it for today. We went an hour and 6 minutes. Not too bad, Joe.
Good job.
Maybe we'll do part 2 later.
Yeah, happy to do it. Yeah.
And don't forget to send your comment too, right? You're a citizen of Wake County.
That's right. Yep.
Send your public comment in there. All right. I'll be looking for it now.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Tune in, share. Like I said, the biggest compliment you can give me or the John Locke Foundation probably is to have you subscribe to your email. I think you guys have an intake form. Me, not so much. I just want people to start talking, not be afraid to talk politics on Facebook until they censor you. So all voices are welcome until you start calling names and not arguing properly, right? There is a proper way to argue and hear all sides. So that's it for today. Thank you so much, Joe. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Enjoy yours. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.